Letter number 10, the bypass roads. 10 years ago, before the current barrier, sharp dispute between Israel and Palestinians was over the so-called bypass roads. Today, the controversy is gone. The roadways are now part of the permanent landscape, winding scores of miles through Palestinian backcountry. The argument for the bypass roads when they were built was that they were for Israel's defense. Specifically, the roads would enable movement of military vehicles. Palestinians looked at the map, in particular locations of settlements, both established and on the drawing board, and denounced the roads as simply serving the convenience of populations that should not be in the West Bank in the first place. Since the onset of the Second Intifada in the year 2000, movement of autos, buses, ambulances, and trucks between Israel, as well as East Jerusalem, and the West Bank at the primary crossing requires protracted delays, as checks of identifications, registrations, and the vehicle's contents take place. Long, chaotic lines of cars back up for blocks, while IDF, that is, Israeli Defense Force personnel, seemingly disdain the thought anyone might have urgent business. If you can avoid these checkpoints and the search of a truckload of chickens in the vehicle immediately ahead, you do so at all costs. As holders of U.S. contractors' identifications, my colleagues and I are able to travel the bypass roads, for instance, between East Jerusalem and Ramallah. As was common in connection with our work, we would take advantage of a bypass route. The journey requires an added 10 kilometers, terminating at a checkpoint called DCO, for Defense Coordination Office, recalling an earlier time when relations between Israel and the Palestinian Authority permitted non-hostile communication. Now all signs of the former PA presence are lacking, and lines of autos are usually short or non-existent. Only on rare occasion, when perhaps passage of military vehicles for a raid into Ramallah delayed us, was it necessary to wait more than a few minutes. A feature of this particular bypass is its course through terraced hills of olive trees. Growing olives is almost as old as human presence in the region. The chalky soil is too arid and rocky for much else. But with carefully tended terraces, handcrafted from the upthrust stratified limestone, it becomes possible to retain moisture, just enough, that is, to give tree roots purchase among the heavy yellow ochre stones. Production of olive oil explains the ancient inhabitation of the Judean hills, at least its urbanized populations. As early as the 7th century, before the Common Era, olive oil pressing shifted from local individual households to a centrally organized commerce. Olives were transported in huge quantities to centers near the coast for pressing, such as to the city of Ekron in Philistia, on the road to modern Ashkelon, north of Gaza. In Ekron, more than 100 olive oil presses have been excavated. It is probably the most impressive olive oil production hub in the ancient Near East. From Ekron, olive oil was transported to Assyria and Egypt, lands notably lacking the environment for olives. These were some of my random thoughts while visually surveying the hills as our driver negotiated the bypass road on a late afternoon. We always made sure to get a start sufficiently early to avoid traveling at night, when reports told of cars hit by Palestinian snipers hidden in the surrounding darkness. Overhead, every 25 yards or so, are halogen lights illuminating the road. Far too close to be explained except as a way of padding a supplier's costs, my suspicions whispered. At an acute bend in the road, where vehicles are forced to slow, and thus perhaps present an inviting target to someone concealed in the adjacent ravine, I spotted extra bright floodlighting. The terraces inevitably draw your attention as models of human industry. I've seen the steep mountain rice terraces of Luzon's Isabela province and the filigreed terraces of Bali. But these parched ridges of Palestine may be more impressive in their own right. Those who grow orchard crops must be a patient people, particularly in a nearly waterless place. Olive trees are designed to flourish in these sere hills. Gnarled trunks bespeak slow growth. Deciduous foliage benefits retention of precious moisture. A spreading canopy signifies a matching root system capable of capturing every wayward drop. In the last days of May 2003, I was scheduled to make a periodic return to the U.S. Before departing, I hope to take some photographs of the olive terraces visible from the bypass road between Jerusalem and Ramallah. There was one beautifully maintained site I had my eye on. The stones had been scrupulously cleared and then placed to create a low wall surrounding a half-dozen strategically separated mature trees. I asked Hani, who was driving, to keep in mind my wish and to slow as we approached the desired spot. He was more than willing, he said. Hani pulled to the shoulder while I extended a camera through the rolled-down window. Judging from the shadows beneath the trees, the hour must have been close to noon. A sweltering heat radiated from above. All at once, excitement spread within the automobile. In the shade, each to his own tree, stood 3 gazelles. They were mountain, or as they are sometimes called in the region, Palestinian gazelle. The coloration and tapering shape reminded me of pronghorn antelope in the southwestern U.S., adapted exquisitely to blend with the muted, dappled background, and when required, take rapid flight. Hani said he had never before seen one of these animals. My language instructor later told me that gazelle derives from an Arabic word and refers to a wide variety of similar species that extend across various types of arid terrain, from North Africa to the Mideast. Back in the States, the OED advises that gazelle probably entered Spanish first, and through Spanish, other Romance languages. The next day, the Palestinian shop delivered to me 2 perfect photographs.